and it is possible to also begin to talk about various strands of it, as imperial nostalgia, colonial nostalgia, and imperialist as being different from imperial, and we can go on and on and on. And then, the way it is related to the question of time, to say nothing of what we may even find in biblical allusions. But much as nostalgia has gained so much ground, it is also important to begin to talk about what I reference as the blind spots of nostalgia, because the narratives and data that speak to the suffering and traumas of the stay at home are usually manifest in parallel to those of the dispersed. But somehow we tend to ignore it because it has something again to do with what I call the disciplinary, and it is possible to also say multidisciplinary orientation and cognition in the social sciences and in the humanities that often ensure that the orientation that often ensures that what we talk about mainly is the suffering of those who are dispersed, because it is possible to talk, for instance, about the sociology, anthropology, blah blah blah, of migration, of dispersal, of diaspora, and of so many things, and nobody is talking about the sociology of the left behind. And it creates a sense of what I call epistemic cul-de-sac. And so in literature, in sociology, in anthropology, in psychology, you find this huge literature about what happens, as it were, to migrant lives, their suffering, their trauma, and all because they are dispersed from the homeland. If at all we want to begin to acknowledge the place of the left behind in the migration discourse, their suffering is best subordinated to the narratives of the dispersed, leaving us to wonder, whether the left behind can even speak, or if at all the left behind can speak. It becomes difficult, as it were, you know, to know whether the import of their suffering can be taken seriously or to mean anything, especially the moment we weigh it against the hegemonic discourse of exile and migration. Yet we need to begin to consider how we may move further. Sorry, I'm trying to see how to move to the next slide, and it's a bit, yes. So these are very, very important issues that we then need to ask ourselves. Beyond the blind spots, what then can we begin to think about? Especially because in an age that tends to stress equity in everything, in an age that tends to talk and emphasize the primacy of equity in, say, One Health, global health, and so many other terms, to say nothing, as it were, of the sustainable development goals, where equity is at the center of the 17 goals. And the question then is, should we always continue to talk only about the sufferings and grief of migrant lives while forgetting what happens to the people they leave behind? During a session with one of the leading migration scholars, Professor Cohen at the University of Oxford some time ago, he said, yeah. That is true. Nobody tends to talk about the people we leave behind because it is also about power relations. Because we have always tended to ascribe so much power, so much importance, as it were, to those who migrate, to the extent that even when they return to those they have left behind, it is still the migrant lives who are empowered, for instance, to project the narratives of their homecoming. So even when they'll be talking about the homeland at their return, it is still going to be from their perspective. And so there is some kind of disequilibrium, I argue. And in addressing this, um, this equilibrium to the valuation of dispersal from homeland as a spectrum, I argue that a composite understanding of the experience of exile and migration generally tends to be enriched when we begin to acknowledge the experience of the left behind as constitutive. The suffering and creativity of the left behind in the homeland, and which are predicated on the dispersal of their loved ones into other lands, then constitute what I have termed extalgia. Now, if nostalgia is a combination of nostos, like I said earlier on, and argos, to form nostalgia, I have coined extalgia by combining the idea of exodus and argos to mean the suffering of stay-at-homes as predicated on the dispersal of their loved ones into other lands. It doesn't matter now whether it is across international borders or within, national borders. However, extalgia is conceived to mean more than suffering and trauma. It is also about the suffering of the stay-at-home for the dispersal of their loved ones, but the entailments of the suffering also acknowledge the possibility and actuality of creativity for transcendence. So we then even begin to ask, do the left behind stay overwhelmed perennially by the dispersal, the feelings of grief and loss and trauma predicated on the dispersal of their loved ones? It is not in all cases. They outgrow it. They tend, to adopt creative measures for coping and for transcendence. And so to come to grips with this understanding, I have drawn upon a cultural practice among the Ogu of Southwest Nigeria and part of the Republic of Benin through, effigy carving at the death of a twin child. Now, twins are particularly valued, considered to be special children among the Ogu. And that says something about what I call the hierarchies of value. And so when a twin child, for instance, dies among the Ogu, the child is buried, but thereafter, the people come together, the community comes together to affirm something on the contrary. They refuse to acknowledge the death of the child, or they find a way of extenuating the enormity of the grief by affirming that the child has not died, but has only proceeded on a firewood fetching journey. And this is where comes the intersection of that cultural practice and migration. So it is, the death is commuted to a journey, but it does not end there, because the community thereafter comes together and carves an effigy in representation of the child. What does that do? It constitutes a source of sorrow, grief on the one hand, but it at the same time also becomes symbolic of creativity. So extalgia is about the simultaneity of grief and creativity. Because every time you take a look at the effigy, oh, everybody is reminded that a child has died, or in the cultural parlance, a child has proceeded on a journey, and the creativity manifests in the effigy that represents it as a source of consolation. And now, I find this particularly instructive, and we can see here some effigies of twins. This mother carries um, both twins about because they are both dead as a reminder, and she bears with it. She embodies in that carriage both grief and creativity. It is important to note, and I'll come back to this later in the conclusion, that the mother is not left alone. The creativity as a measure of coping is something that is collectively done as a way of caring for the left behind in that context. This Beninese musician, Sagbohan, has also taken time to explain further this cultural practice. And another thing that I find striking is how extalgia and death, you know, have some kind of um, resonance with each other. So you find some kind of correspondence, and which Achebe spent some time to illustrate in his memoir, his last memoir. There was a country where, we find exile and extalgia coming together in such where he begins to recollect the experience of his elementary school teacher who sent his nephew to the US to train. And the young man graduated, wrote the uncle that he will be coming home the following month, but unfortunately he died before he could return. And now the grief be becomes some kind of double grief for the uncle back home. It is, in the first place, about this literal death, and in the other, the grief is complicated, as it were, by the fact that the nephew dies far away from home and will never return. But once we take it outside the context of death, we discover that extalgia is productive in showing us how people who are not dead, but who go away, leave behind scars of grief and sorrow in the people they leave behind. There is a sense in which Toni Morrissey captures this in Sula, when in the dedication section, she talks about how it is sheer good fortune to meet somebody long before they leave. This book is for Ford and Slade, whom I miss, although they have not left. And this takes me to what I call the broad categorization of extalgia, that there is pre-departure extalgia and there is post-departure extalgia. Of course, in between, we can also begin to talk about the extalgia that happens while the people are in transit. And so, have we always thought about it? The fact that the moment you realize a loved one is about to leave, some kind of depression, some kind of sorrow, some kind of grief can come upon you, no matter how good the mission of the person that is about to go away is. This challenges us to begin to look at how we may handle these questions. And then another illustration of pre-departure extalgia I have drawn from George Lamin's classic, In the Castle of My Skin. There we're talking about, in the Nigerian parlance, a single mother, a mother abandoned by her husband, and she's taking it upon herself to raise their only son, and her determination is that this child will grow up to amount to something in life. She's done everything for this child to succeed. And in the end, the child has truly succeeded because upon the completion of his high school education, he gets a job and he has to travel out to another country. But what is supposed to be a source of joy has also become for this mother a source of frustration, and we can see all the symptoms of um, trauma manifesting, you know, from the repetitions, and from the complaints and from all the other issues that ordinarily shouldn't have come up. And this I find so touching. You may say I am a big botheration to you, but for all I know, I may never ever bless my eyes on you again. So I take this opportunity to remind you of one or two things. And she goes on and on and on and on and on. And Boyji will observe. She gave me another piece of advice and another warning and started to reread the list. I didn't know how many times she has read it. And all this, goes on. Eh, Taking a look at post-departure extalgia, I want to begin with Achebe's Things Fall Apart, and it is an attempt to read the work against the grain, whereby what I find here is a combination of death and extalgia, a combination of a journey. It wasn't just death, and we shouldn't forget that Okonkwo's mom, Okonkwo's wife, even tells Nwoye that Ikemefuna will be going on a journey. Much as Okonkwo thought or thinks he will be a very strong man, at the death of Ikemefuna, he becomes overwhelmed with extalgia, because the seriousness of Okonkwo's extalgia consists of the pitiable psychological torture occasioned by the departure and death, knowing that even with the palm wine he manages to take, he ends up with eyes red and fierce like the eyes of a rat when it was caught by the tail and dashed against the floor. Earlier we have been told that he tried not to think about the Kemefuna, but the more he tried, the more he thought about him, which are some of the feelings people have, when their loved ones depart. And there could also even be psychological issues, like in Andrea Levy's Small Island, where the question about who is my father drives a mother completely crazy, in that literal sense, because she becomes overwhelmed by the necessity of showing her daughter who her father is. But the father has gone away and has not returned. And this happened one day. Unfortunately, the procession of airmen momentarily stopped, and Celia's mother ran to one airman and said, "Celia, this is your dad. I told you he would come." The airman had obviously never seen this woman before. The young boy, younger even than Celia, glanced around confused while compatriots jeered. That says something about how those left behind can even lose their minds. And what does this tell us? We shall be examining that as we move towards the concluding part of this work, but still on post-extalgia, post-departure extalgia. In Helen Habila's Measuring Time, we read about a character, Pandi, who literally dies upon for the knowledge that her young brother, little brother, is conscripted into the army. And because she's not sure the brother will ever return alive, we are told that Pandi's heart broke when Haruna went off to war. and she died soon afterwards, and there are, as I will show us later, you know, um, forms of empirical correspondence whereby people have literally fallen into depression and died just because their loved ones have migrated and they are not able to connect back, with them. Just as diasporas adopt coping and creative measures to transcend the travails of dispersal and homesickness, I argue that the left behind too also seek extremely creative ways of assuaging the pains and traumas predicated on the dispersal of their loved ones back to in the castle of my skin. Looking at creativity now, because I mean, going back to the effigy carving practice, I did say that the effigy is symbolic of both grief and creativity. And so, in the case of the left behind, in the case of the left behind mother, single mother, for her, it is about doing everything possible to ensure she succeeds in training her son at college as a single mother. And so we are told that seized by the thought of being left alone, she will become filled with an overwhelming ambition for her child and an even greater defiance of the odds against her. She will talk about pulling through. Whatever happened, she will come through, and she meant her child. And so people find various creative ways of coping when they are left behind. And it is high time we began to consider this. Uh, Sorry, having no, no, no. Hold on, please. I am moving. Okay, yes, I'm now to the next slide. And so in small island, let us see, and this is also very important, part of how some people cope with their strategies, cope with their trauma, is that they engage in another journey. So extalgia, I have argued, it is also about some kind of vicious cycle of unending journeys. And so in small island, we are told that a family, a Caribbean family, um, faces this challenge. And this is how some female members of the family have decided to solve the challenge. Mommy and Auntie May no longer spent their days on cakes, but had now turned their talents to the decorating of their hearts. These hearts were being readied for a journey that will see them visiting all their exiled offspring in America and Canada. Cheerful, they declared that this lovingly prepared for trip around North America was a mission that could take them a long, long time. While Daddy, frail and old, rocking on the veranda sipping a sour drink, laced so potent it could kill a bull, dozed drunkenly unaware he was about to be abandoned. And that speaks to what I mean by the vicious cycle, and which has always been the kind of response that some people um, make as a way of coping. So they then go on another journey looking for that person that's left home. I'll be talking more about this later in empirical terms. For some others, the creativity becomes literally artistic, like we will find in Ngugi's Wizard of the Crow, when Kamiti leaves Nyawira behind as he journeys to the US at the invitation of the ruler. And we are told that as Nyawira stood at the gate irresolutely, watching her friend disappear in the distance, a song she once heard sung by the girls of the village popped into her mind, a silent lullaby to herself. She went inside the shrine and took out her guitar again. She sat on the veranda, and now Almost miraculously, the strings responded softly, her eyes now set on a distance far away. You vowed never to go away. Now you have gone, leaving me here alone, pleading with you to stay. Stay one more night. The thought of him, the wizard of the crow in America, in the care of the dictator, no longer sure that she will ever see him. Clearly, there are so many incredible songs that have become classics. And by the time you begin to probe into their creation or composition, you realize that there were songs that were inspired by experiences of being left behind, like one that trends on social media, especially in African content these days, Kasongo, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's about Kasongo going away, leaving the wife and the children behind, and then um, the the band members coming around to realize this, and then singing, composing a song so that wherever Kasongo is, he can listen to it and return home because the wife and the children miss him. And then, in some other instances, extalgia can take a communal dimension, as in Badagry, a coastal town in Lagos State, Nigeria, that used to be a slave coast. And the thought that so many fellow Africans were moved through the coast to the Americas, eventually informed the establishment of what is today known as the Badagry Diaspora Festival. So they want to reconcile. The entire community is traumatized, and they think how to take care of that is to organize a diaspora festival that will bring back descendants of those slaves. We have seen how Shoyinka in You Must Set Forth at Dawn recollects the 70s and all the journeys across the world to Brazil, to the UK, Senegal, and everywhere in search of Oriolokun, a figurehead that stands, for one of the ancestors of the Yoruba. And then there continues to be great works of art in literature, in film, in sculpture about the looted Benin artifacts. These are instances of extalgia. Extalgia will lead to creativity. And then we're talking about Namibia and the quest for discourse that were looted and taken to Germany and other places. We can talk about, President Mandela leading the South African nation to request the return of Sarah Baartman's remain. This is what extalgia can do because it persists. The trauma persists in the absence of closure. And then when there is no creativity in the context of extalgia, I argue that then there will be a disastrous consequence. And that's the kind of thing you find in Sula. When the eponymous character becomes a liability, a disastrous, devastating liability to the community. And she reflects on her own condition when she says, in a way, oh no, it is the narrator now, in a way, her craving, Sula's craving for the other half of her equation was the consequence of an idle imagination. Had she paints or clay or knew the discipline of the dance or strings? Had she anything to engage her tremendous curiosity and her gift for metaphor? She might have exchanged restlessness and preoccupation with him for an activity that provided her with all she yearned for. And like any artist with no art form, she became dangerous, meaning when there is no response of creativity to extalgia, there could be a disaster, as in the case of Sula. Here is a Nigerian film, Gone, where we also find a whole lot of disaster when a man leaves his family, an Imashaun leaves his family, goes away and stays incommunicado for 25 years. But beyond this, we also need to begin to look at extalgia in in empirical from an empirical perspective. And so, for instance, from my initial publication, we have begun to engage in collaboration with some institutions, one of which is the University of Iowa in the US, where we are currently looking at the nexus between mental health, um, mental illness, and being left behind. It's a pilot study, and it's amazing the findings we already have. The fact that being left behind, like Celia's mother that we saw earlier on, will actually result in mental challenges for people. And this points to something. And extalgia can lead to death. I remember when I had just begun writing the initial reflection on extalgia, I was excitedly sharing my insights with a colleague, and suddenly she became very, very sad. And she responded in pidgin, I'll interpret that, "Not be waiting kill my mama be that." Meaning, that's exactly what my mother died of. And I said, "Excuse me, how did your mother die of that?" He said, our eldest brother, our firstborn, left for Canada. He would speak with our mom every day, yet he would speak with our mom every day on phone, yet every time our mom will keep on making some silent comments repeatedly. "Oh, this son of mine Australia. This son of mine left for Australia and wouldn't return." Despite the fact that the mother was speaking to the son on the phone every day, there was some kind of affective deficit, that could not be accounted for, that could not be catered for by the phone conversation. And she said ultimately the mother fell into depression and died. That is how serious extalgia is. It could also cause illness. In the course of collecting data, a respondent told us that her father traveled in the 80s to the US, or was it the UK, for further studies, and completed his studies and then stayed back to work, refusing to return home. And during the period of the father's stay away from home, the mother fell sick, fell ill, and it was so serious, she became very pale, and everybody had given up on her. And then she said, surprisingly, the moment the father finally returned home, within the space of 3 to 6 months, the mother got well and lived much longer than anybody would expect. So it's about illness, it's about wellness. It has the capacity to provoke other forms of migration. Like I said earlier on, I met a colleague who said, during this Sierra Leone war, we got scattered all over the place. And now what my mother does is she comes to see me in Ghana for 3 months, and then goes to Australia for 3 months to see another sibling, and goes to the US. And that is how she spends every year. That is, part of what extalgia can cause. And now I need to talk briefly before I round off on a project by the IOM currently, um, uh, um, called the Missing Migrants Project. And this is quite instructive. The fact that the International Organization for Migration's project on missing migrants is not actually about the migrants that are missing, but about their left behind relations who are going through a lot of suffering, a lot of trauma and grief for being left behind, and who are now raising alarms, who are now going everywhere in desperation looking for their missing relations. And yet there are limits to creativity and the transcendence, which speaks to what I call the imperative of support systems for the left behind. And now, in my conclusion, the imperative of support systems for the left behind. It takes us back to what I call the cultural model of the Ogu effigy carving practice. We'll take a look at it. It is about the community coming together to join in the grief of the mother and to also, in the process, get creative about her transcendence. This is very important. This is symbolically instructive because it speaks to the imperative of considering how we may begin to look at how to take care of the left behind. And when we talk about the notion of equity in migration, the literature on equity and migration is all about migrants. But it is now important, it is now necessary for us to begin to look at that equity from the perspective of the mobile lives and those they leave behind. Because the equity in question, even when it has become hegemonic, can always be reviewed. The idea of global health is another thing we need to take into consideration. If global health is about inclusivity, it's about, leaving no one behind, then it has become necessary for us to begin to look at how we care, for the left behind. Already we all know that there are international organizations like the Red Cross, the IOM, and so many others, the UN and its various agencies that do a lot in taking care of migrants. It may be necessary to begin to also look at this. So the whole idea of One Health should cover everybody, including the left behind. And so there is that need for institutional, framework of various kinds to assist the left behind. And for instance, I want to say that there should be special psychology and counseling centers for those about to be left behind. Especially from the African perspective now, when you have a relation that is traveling to the global north, you're like excited. My brother is going away, he's going to the US, my sister is doing this and that. And then thereafter, you discover that you become really depressed. Some people don't get out of it. Isn't I strongly feel, and I think it's the same everywhere, that stuff about the great feeling, that initial feeling of missing somebody. It is important to begin to tell them, yeah, you're excited because your brother, your sister is going away for something good, but you're also going to miss him. We need to begin to expand the practice of psychology and counseling to this level. And then in psychiatry and so many, and for those who have already been left behind, those about to be left behind, and those already left behind also need this kind of care. There is that need for public awareness campaigns, about the welfare of the left behind. There must also be curricular review in various departments to include the left behind in what I call the cartography and mapping of the migration geography. I mean, every time we talk about migration, what comes to mind is those who migrate. But now we need to begin to see that intersection between those who migrate and those they leave behind. They are also part of the migration cycle, I argue. And then there must be institution, the institution of national and international organizations to care for the left behind. I mean, could we begin to have parallels of the Red Cross, of the IOM, and so many other institutions that will be attentive, to the health of the left behind? Communities at various levels can also begin to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you.
Anyone with online or in person want to start us off? Yeah, Dr. Pukudu.
Thank you, Dr. La Olua. You hearing me?
Sorry, I cannot hear. I can't quite hear the.
Hello?
Can you hear now?
Hello? Hello? Dr. La Olua?
Yes.
I think it's on his end. Because when we speak, that thing on the green bottom left is moving. See how it's picking up? Yeah. It's on his end.
Yeah, can others hear us online? Hello, online. Can somebody say whether you can hear us?
Yeah, they are replying.
Okay, yeah. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Dr. Kola Adekola. I'm from the University of Ibadan, but actually right now I'm at the Cyprus Institute in Nicosia, Cyprus. Yeah, I really appreciate Professor Senayola Lua. That's a beautiful one, very beautiful one. But I have a feeling this is more of humanitarian theme. I think what we need right now as scholars is a combination of several disciplinary, methods to interrogate some of these migration issues. I remember sometimes ago, you and I were discussing the issue of doing an archaeological investigations of Badagry. I think it's even more imperative now that we need a collaborative interdisciplinary methods to interrogate migration issues. We should not restrict it to the material culture that people are moving with, or whether how it affects the communities they are moving into, or the communities where they are moving out from alone. We need to see it from different perspectives and different lenses, so that at least maybe if we cannot have a complete view of the entire thing at the end of the day, we can have something that is more holistic. Thank you. That was a beautiful one. I appreciate you for that. Thank you.
So I don't, it's not clear that he.
Yeah, I don't think he can hear us. You cannot hear us, right? Then you should just go ahead with those only.
Well, as I don't know if he can hear the previous question or comment either. I'm not.
Okay, yeah, because it's not responding.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Technology.
But you could type in the comments.
Yes. So somebody who has access. Okay. Yeah.
You want to type and then he will respond.
Okay. Thank you. You're very kind.
Okay. So people online can hear us. That's good. So let's see.
Am I to respond to the first question, or we wait for more questions?
Oh, please, yeah, respond to the question, because, and there's also a question in the chat. Can you hear us?
Oh, okay. I would like to thank Dr. Adekola for that question. Absolutely. In my first publication, part of my conclusion is that extalgia challenges scholars to adopt a multidisciplinary approach. It is not about just one discipline. It is about all disciplines, because it is something that is manifest everywhere. And that is why currently the collaborative research with the University of Iowa is with the department, with the College of Health Sciences, at that university, and the College of Medicine at the University of Ibadan, and then the Institute of African Studies. And so we are collaborating with researchers in psychiatry, just as we are with sociologists, health sociologists, to begin to establish in a very firm way in that pilot study what we consider to be the nexus, as it were, between mental challenges and being left behind.
Yeah, can I ask you the question that is in the chat from Dr. Gladys Mwangi, who is here in the United States at Johnson County Community College. She had to leave, but she left a question in the chat. I think I'll ask you the question. So she thanks you for your work, and then she says she agrees with you that a psychological perspective to extalgia is important. The question is this: does extalgia always have a poor prognosis, or are there also instances when it doesn't happen the same way? So if someone was a troublemaker, like a thief or a murderer, and they leave, does that still create extalgia? Or are there people for which this extalgia will not arise?
Is that a question from Gladys Mwangi?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll just read it here because there is so much noise from my end here. I'll read it and then yeah. My question is, does extalgia always have a poor prognosis? No. That is death or illness, and no, it does not always have that. Because some people are able to navigate, as it were, you know, their grief and even make the best of it. Symbolically, when we begin to talk about those who turn their extalgic grief into music, into performance, then we know that we are talking about people who are able to manage it. But generally, not many people are able to manage it. We've had instances of people who fall into depression and all that. So it is not absolute, but in a situation where they cannot cope, such people will need some care, and we need some systems of care for them to cope. That is the argument I am making.
Yeah.
And then he was talking about when somebody is a murderer or a thief and they leave. Do not forget, nobody misses a thief, a murderer. And that was why I began with the effigy carving. I began by telling us that twins are valued, meaning twin children are not rated as other children. So it's about the hierarchies of value. Some people go away and you don't miss them at all. Some people go away, you don't miss them at all. But we are talking about people on whom we place so much value. It is when those go away that we feel their absence. And that is the argument. Thank you very much.
So we have a question here in the room. Do you want to try to give your question? Maybe if you speak loud, they will hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay,
Hey,
is it the next question here? Given the current state of the economy of some
No, there's a question.
There's a question in the room.
Can you
okay,
hear
a question
us?
in the room. Okay.
Okay.
Then maybe you speak
Okay.
and I can see.
Hello? Dr. Olalua, hello.
Yes, hello.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm a theater person, so let me start with a joke. It seems if Trump were to see the conclusion of your presentation, he would have a cure for extalgia. In fact,
Sorry,
not just
I can't hear you well. I can't hear you well, please.
Okay. You know, Trump is our president.
Oh,
Did you
sorry,
hear
is it
that?
possible to just write it so I can read it easily? I'm sorry about that.
Okay, sorry, don't worry. Let you go on with
Okay, so
Somebody
please,
can write
you can.
it down
No.
so I can read. There is so much noise here. And while that goes on, I can move on to the next question on the screen. Is that allowed,
please.
Chairman?
Yes, please.
All right. Given the current state of the economy of some African countries, e.g. Nigeria, Migration creates opportunity for the migrant to send money home and make life bearable for the folks at home. Do you think those at home will experience extalgia given the financial opportunity the migration of their loved ones brings? Yeah, this question has always come up. And this is when I also explained that extalgia is a theory of intimacy. It's a theory of intimacy. Among the Urobo people of Nigeria, they name a child Ononife, meaning this is greater than money. And I think among the Igbo, there is also an equivalent. And among my people, they say akwemaho. There are some things that cannot be purchased by money. Yes, and right now we are in the field, and there are parents, there are relations whose children send them dollars, pounds, and euros, and they appear to be comfortable, yet they are depressed. I'll give you an illustration. One of our co-researchers, who is a professor of psychiatry, was sharing a case with us that the woman has 4 children. 3 of them are already in the global north and are doing well and sending a lot of money home. So money is not her problem because the dollars keep on coming. But that with time, she began to lose her mental balance and then finally lost it when the last child still living with her in Nigeria also decided to leave the country. So, and then we begin to see the limits of monetization, the limits of neoliberal capitalism, because extalgia, like I said, is also about intimacy. It's a theory of intimacy. And so it is not in all cases that the money gives them joy. Some of them receive the dollars and still go into depression. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question online, another question in the chat. Do you want to take that one?
Another question on the screen. Yeah, let me go at it. Can we also understand death as a form of permanent migration that has its own left behind people? Absolutely. You know, the conventional literature of migration and exile has always affirmed some kind of intersection between death and exile. Yes, and there is some kind of extalgia that comes, as it were, with the literal death of loved ones. Can non-humans, pets, companion animals also be part of the left behind that also feel extalgia? Absolutely, yes. There is an aspect, you know, my research is actually a book project. There are chapters that I devote to the non-human others. And I'll flip that a bit here. First, the fact that human beings fall into extalgic sensibilities, not only because of fellow human beings, but because of valued objects, artifacts. You know, some personal effects can actually make one fall, as it were, into extalgic sensibilities. And that is why, for instance, in Namibia, you know, see, you find the Herero and Nama people, you know, agitating, as it were, for the return of the skulls of their ancestors. These are objects, and people can feel that. And of course, those who are into animal psychology also know that animals can fall into depression because of their owners who have left them behind, or for any sense of, you know, being left behind that they may have. To what extent? Another question, can we address the extalgia with further migrations? Say, bringing my extalgic left behind mother to come join me in my new base. Absolutely. That is part of what I call the coping strategy. But while you are planning to take your mother, who is suffering from extalgia, to join you, you need to also ask yourself, how does your mom's going away affect his sister, your auntie? You may also want to ask yourself that question. Or if you have chosen to take only your mother away, how does that affect your father? These are some of the questions, that we need, and that is why, systems of care, have to be instituted, because at every point in time, there is always somebody that is left behind. How do we care for them? Now, to the next question. There is a Yoruba proverb that says 20 children cannot live together for 20 years. Children will always leave home and may not have the opportunity for visiting even when they live in the same country with their parents. So, my question is, does extalgia occur only when loved ones leave the country? No. Extalgia can occur in whatever form. And in my presentation, I mentioned it that the migration we're talking about here is not only international migration. It could even be migration within, the borderlands of a nation. And so migration, extalgia can manifest in any form, not only from the international dimension. Then I have another question. How do you think AI and recent developments in technology will impact extalgia, especially in regards to holographic technology systems and video calling? Yes, yes, yes. That is part of the coping strategies. But I must also let you know that much as, like I thought, like the data I shared earlier on, this guy kept on speaking with the mother on Skype, on Zoom every day, yet the mom would say, this son of mine went to Australia and will not return. Meanwhile, some other children were with him back home in Nigeria. And that is where we begin to talk about the hierarchies of value. Mothers can be so emotional in Africa about their firstborn. And it's about that sentiment of my firstborn left me. Parents, and I'm sharing another part of the data where a respondent was telling me that she said, for my grandmom, any son or daughter of hers could go anywhere, but Uncle Femi. And so all the other children were traveling out of the country, were going to Kano and other places in Nigeria, and the mother was cool. But the day she heard that Femi traveled away, she said the mother kept on shouting the name Femi. Oh, Femi has left me. Why would Femi leave me? Why would Femi go away without taking me along? And that this woman kept on engaging in this repetitive lamentation for 3 years until she fell into depression and died. And that is why it is about the hierarchies of value. Some other children will go away and they will not mean anything to the parents. So it's about the twins who are special. So it's about the value. We ascribe to some of our relations. Some people die, you don't even care. Some people go away, you don't care. So these are the issues. These are the dynamics that we need to keep on considering. I'm moving on to the next question. I think Trump may love your presentation. Goodness, will sending every migrant home solve both nostalgia and extalgia? No, I am not saying we are solving the problem this way. I have not said there is anything inherently wrong in migration. We need to get this right. In human history, migration has always subsisted and will continue. After all, I am not even at home. I am not at home right now. My mother is away in the village. But the point is that just as we care for those who migrate, that is the main argument here. We also have to learn to institute systems of care for those we leave behind. In some other cases, all that is required is closure. When valued artifacts are looted, taken away, kingdoms, communities, societies keep on agitating. For instance, for the return of those artifacts looted and kept in the British Council Museum in London and in other places. And this pain, this grief will not go away until justice is done. And so extalgia is also about reparative justice. And that is the argument I am making. Now, to the next question, I recognize the extalgia as severe separation anxiety, which can develop into mental health and physical health challenges. As a care theory scholar, I wonder if extalgia can be exploitative and selfish, as family relationships are not always intimate. Do the younger people who move away experience the same level of extalgia as they pursue their life goals, such as work, school, blah, blah, blah? No, those who go away can only experience nostalgia. Don't forget, it is the level, and my concern is not about those who go away, because literature across all disciplines has taken care of those who go away. In my interaction with the professor of psychiatry, he told me point blank that in the literature of psychiatry, there is little to talk about in terms of psychiatric challenges associated with the left behind. But there is a huge literature around mental challenges, psychiatric challenges of migrants. And this is the point we are making. It is about One Health. It is about global health. It is about equity, at all levels. And that is exactly what we are talking about. Like I did say, migration is constitutive of human experience, of human history, and there is nothing we can do about it. But in so doing, those left behind may need to be catered for, because there is already this disequilibrium in the power relations. Because generally we tend to project and grant visibility to those who go away, because they are privileged. Because we all know that migration is also about affordability, and where there are others that are trapped in immobility. The question then is, how do we cater, as it were, to them? Can there be formal institutional frameworks, as we have for those who migrate, to take care of them? That is the point we are making here. And there is another question. The coping strategies are far inadequate in taking care of extalgia, but the economies of African countries can hardly support system for it. Absolutely. Africa, like any other continent, is a work in progress. And we cannot actually, I do not even agree that it is about the resources now. It is about the right management of the resources. And of course, people will continue to go away, because even when progress, in the case of Western Europe, resulted in migration for the conquest of other nations that were considered not as, in quote, civilized. It was still about leaving home. It was still about going away. So even when the economy is good, even when modernity drove the idea of colonialism, we need to understand that it is an illustration of how, to every condition, whether development, underdevelopment, migration is always in the picture. And so whether Africa is comfortable or not, people will still migrate. And what we are saying is that whether it is in North America, because extalgia is not a theory for Africa, it's a theory I challenge scholars across the world to consider because whether the economy is good or not, the American economy is great, but then there are Americans who suffer extalgia because people still keep on moving from Americans still keep on moving from one part of the world to another, from one state to another. There are separations here and there. There are relations, and it is not about another post-colonial theory to deal with the post-colonial condition. It is a theory that everybody across the world can benefit from, and that is the point we are making here.
So let me wrap up because we're out of time here. We need to wrap up on this end. So I would just note that I think Agnes Phoebe's point about the fact that intimacy involves positive exchange and affect, but it also involves exploitation sometimes. So I think the larger point she is bringing up is the possibility that extalgia, like any other kind of motivation or affect, people can exploit it for their own purposes, and maybe people feel, especially she's encouraging you to look at that, I think. But I would ask everybody to join me in thanking you for the presentation today. And we'll be in touch about some other things and possible future collaborations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.